It doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes emotional detachment looks like someone who's calm, composed, easygoing. They don't argue much. They don't react strongly. They rarely seem overwhelmed by what's happening around them. From the outside, it can even look like emotional maturity. But if you pay closer attention, there's something else happening underneath. They listen carefully in conversations, but rarely reveal much about themselves. They support other people's feelings, but keep their own vague and distant. And when things start getting emotionally intense, they subtly pull back. Not in an obvious way, just enough to create distance. And most people don't question it, because detachment is quiet. It doesn't cause scenes. It doesn't create conflict. It simply removes itself from it. You might notice it in small moments. Someone asks how they're really doing, and they give a short, neutral answer. A conversation gets personal, and they gently redirect it somewhere safer. Someone gets emotionally close, and suddenly they become a little harder to read. Nothing dramatic happens, but the connection never quite goes deeper. And what's interesting is that many emotionally detached people are actually highly aware of other people's emotions. They notice subtle shifts in tone, small changes in energy, unspoken tension in a room. But instead of reacting emotionally, they analyze it. They watch. They interpret. They try to understand what's happening beneath the surface. This creates an interesting dynamic. They can understand emotions deeply without always showing their own, which sometimes makes them appear mysterious, distant, or hard to read. But internally, the experience is often very different. Because constantly observing emotions without expressing them can create its own kind of exhaustion. Imagine being present in every emotional situation, but rarely stepping fully into it. Always slightly outside, always aware, always measured. Eventually, detachment stops feeling like a choice. It becomes the default way of interacting with the world. And by that point, many people don't even question it anymore. They simply assume that's how they are. Calm, reserved, private. But when you trace the pattern back far enough, emotional detachment usually began as a response. A way of maintaining stability in environments where emotional expression felt uncertain or risky. It was never random. It was an adaptation, a quiet strategy for maintaining emotional safety. And once a strategy works, the mind tends to keep using it, even long after the original situation has changed. Which means someone can still be emotionally detached in environments that are actually safe. Not because they don't care, but because their system learned that distance was the safest place to stand. And that's the paradox of emotional detachment. From the outside, it can look like strength, and sometimes it is. The ability to stay calm and observant is a powerful skill. But when distance becomes constant, connection starts to feel unfamiliar. Not impossible, just unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things tend to make the mind cautious. Which brings us back to the pattern. Emotional detachment isn't simply about personality. It's about how someone learned to relate to emotion itself. Whether emotion was something to express or something to manage privately, whether closeness felt natural or something that required careful control. And once you start noticing those patterns, they appear everywhere. In quiet pauses during conversations, in the way someone listens but rarely shares, in the calm exterior that hides a very active internal world. It doesn't mean something is broken. It means a system learned how to protect itself. And once you see emotional detachment through that lens, it stops looking cold or distant. It starts looking like what it often is, a quiet form of emotional self-protection. And like most patterns built for protection, it made sense at the time.
even if it's still shaping the way someone moves through relationships today. Once you notice it, the behavior starts to make a lot more sense. Because it was never random. It was a pattern. And once you see the pattern, you begin to understand the person behind it. And sometimes that awareness alone changes how you look at yourself and how you look at others. Because emotional detachment isn't always about not feeling. More often, it's about feeling carefully and keeping those feelings somewhere safe, where they can't be misunderstood, where they can't create chaos, where they can simply exist quietly.